We're at day 5. This is the last day of our dev tools, but it's not the last day that we'll be using them. We'll be continuing to use the dev tools every day, but hopefully after this week, everyone will have a really good feeling with how to navigate through them and leverage some of the tools and even explore some of the stuff we didn't cover. There's a lot of things in there that we didn't get to. I mainly just went through the things that are the most commonly used, but there are a lot of extra tools in there that are definitely important. Remember to be checking the shortcuts. I'll show you how to get to those one more time here. If we hit this little gear wheel, we can hit the shortcuts. Make sure you're going through these different shortcuts, and just try to learn 1 or 2 of these a day if you can. If you think of it, and maybe do the same thing with VS Code as well. Open up your VS Code shortcuts and try to learn some of those little tricks to make things go a little faster. There's a lot of shortcuts that you can leverage in there to speed up your workflows. So just kind of reminding that this is here. We'll start off today like we did yesterday with a code review. This one's going to be set up just a little bit differently. It's not going to be an actual project. This one's just going to be code snippets. And there, I believe, in almost enough of us to get every snippet. So someone might have to do 2 or 3 of them until we get into going over the errors. So let me open up. Oops, wrong app. There we go. All right. So again, I'll just go around and just have you explain each section of this, so you can see where the next section starts here and where it begins, and just kind of run through. Maybe talk about what this function, for example, would output, explain what's happening up above, and just kind of run through this and explain this code. So I see Omar first on my list here. So if you want to get us started here.
Okay, so number is 5, string is 3. Okay, so we are defining a number which is 5 and defining variables, and then defining a string which is a number but it's a string. So we have to combine number and string, and the function, it says tricky variables console log. Okay, so basically it's the function is to combine these 2 variables, and the console log will give a combination of both of the variables, like making it so I believe it will be 5 and 3, because it's not going to be summed up, because one is string, one is a number.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the result would be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because this is a number and this is a string, it's going to do type conversion on the number, and it will turn this into a string as well. And then in this case, this becomes concatenation. So this is actually the string 5 plus the string 3, which is
okay,
5,
so
3.
5, 3, okay.
Yeah, and then whenever we console.log that, we'll see that. So you are right. It will show both of those, but it'll show it as one single string because we're just concatenating 2 strings here.
Okay.
If we were to put 2 plus signs here, do you know what that would do? I might have to put a space there.
Yeah, so that will be give a space between. Then it's gonna separate them with a space in between.
This won't add a space. If I were to do
no,
this,
because if the space was to be added, then yes.
Yeah. So do you have any idea what having 2 plus signs would do to this little bit of an expression here?
2 plus signs? No, not on top of my head. No.
That's okay. It's one of those things where when you see it by itself, a lot of times I'll do this in an if statement where I'll have if, and then I'll put plus string like this is less than number. This is a way to convert a string to a number, kind of like %. So seeing it by itself, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. Also, that's the same process over there. So it's converting the string into a number. So then it will be 5 plus 3 is equal to 8.
Exactly.
Okay. So that was actually tricky. Okay.
Yeah, and that's why we called it tricky variables. But yeah, that's just a quick way to do type conversion. You don't see this done like this very often in an expression. Typically, I mean, I've seen it like this before, where they just put pluses in front of everything, and it gets really hard to read and understand whenever you're looking at it like this. I would probably use something like parse int instead of the plus sign in that case. Not because one's better than the other, but because one is more readable than the other. So if I have parse int on both of these, the other one's already an int, but it makes it really clear what the data types are when you do this. And it doesn't hurt anything to change them into integers. So in this case, it would also be 8.
Good question. So even if we don't write parse int in front of the number, so it's going to still function the same way because it's already a number, right?
Yeah, the only reason I would have it set like this is typically your numbers are coming in from some sort of prompt or input or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And it would just control the data as it comes in. Whenever I build my functions, I assume that the data could be anything. And then I try to account for that. So even though we know this is a number because we're clearly seeing it's defined there, a lot of times I'll still just throw methods like this out of habit because a lot of my functions are built in a more abstract manner so that they can be used more dynamically across the rest of my code. And that's a really good principle to keep in mind whenever you're building functions and designing functions, is keeping your functions abstract so that they can have more than one use. For example, we could build out a function that takes in user input, and it just makes sure that, say, a username has at least 1 character in it, and it can be no longer than 20 characters. So we'll call this string check, and it takes in a string. And what we'd want to do is say if string dot length is greater than 0 and string dot length is less than, say, 20, so that would give us a maximum of 20, then we could return string. So what this is just doing is it's just checking that the string is in the right thing. We could also return true here. So we could say if the string is valid, then just return that yes, the string is valid. And what I mean by keeping this abstract, you could make this a little bit more reusable by saying we put more parameters in here. We could say min and max. That way this function can now be used on more than just one use case. So we had our username, we're setting it between 0 and 20, but what if I also want to do this for a middle initial? Maybe I want my middle initial to be limited to 2. So whenever I would invoke the function, I would say min and max here. And also with a middle initial, you might not have a middle initial, so that could be a 0 in that case. So we would say max, and then when you invoke the function, depending on what you're doing with it, you would pass in either 0 and 20, or if you want to have a minimum of at least 1 character, it can't be blank, you could put that at 1. If it's a middle initial, maybe limit this to 3 characters, that sort of thing. So this is what I mean when I say keeping your functions abstract as possible. We can now use this function for more than just checking usernames. We can use it for checking last names, first names, emails, and we could add more and more parameters up here. We could also give these default parameters. We could say min equals 0, max equals 20. And then by default, these are already set to 0 and 20. Then all I have to do is pass in my string. I don't have to put any parameters here. But if I do put parameters in there, it'll change these values later, and it'll make the function a little bit more usable that way as well. So it's a little off of what we were talking here, but I just wanted to kind of go into that and just show you some of the functionality you can come up with by keeping things abstract. And now I just created a reusable function here that can be used on multiple applications even. I could put this into its own file and then just import it in and reuse it later. All right, so the next one I see here is Wei. So I'm going to have you go over this one here, Wei. Just kind of walk through it. It's okay if you don't have the solution off the top of your head. Just try to get through the vocabulary as much as you can and just tell me what's going on in this code block.
Okay. The function is calculate log, which I guess is going to log to the console. It says let A equal 10 and let B equal 20. and then let the sum equal A plus B. And
And
I
what,
guess
what
we
does
use
those mean? What does let A equal 10 mean?
let A equal 10 mean that I guess it's 10 as a number. It's the value of A is 10.
Yes. Yeah, and the terminology I'm looking for here is we're declaring a variable and assigning it to 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just kind of trying to get used to the vocabulary as well
The
as explaining the
vocabulary.
code.
And
Yeah,
the
so
A
I
is a
can
variable, right?
I can tell that you understand what's happening, but I want to
Uh-huh.
make sure that you also know the vocabulary to describe what's happening.
Thank you.
So
I
just trying to get us
appreciate
all in the habit of that. It's one of those
Okay.
things where as you're learning it, it's a little weird sometimes.
it. So
Um,
we are declaring the variable A into 10, and we're
yes.
also declaring the variable B into 20, and then we are declaring the sum or the end of the equation, which is A plus B, but it's actually multiplied. So, but when you do that, do you have to put the sum is A plus B, and then you have to put multiply under it, or could you just put let multiply equals A plus B without the sum?
So this is actually doing two different operations here.
Okay.
This expression is getting a sum,
Okay.
and this expression is attempting to multiply two values together.
Oh, okay.
And I'm saying attempting to because there's a little thing right here. That I don't know if you caught that. This is a
A
string.
string. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you try to multiply a string, that's actually going to throw an error.
Oh, because it's
So
go ahead. I'm
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say because a string is an array, correct?
No, a string is a string.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a primitive data type.
Okay.
Let me just bring this into the browser here and run it. And I'll demonstrate what happens with this. I'm going to copy it and I'll just paste it right into the browser. We already have the console open. So I'll just drop that in there, and then I'm going to call it by saying calculate and log invoked. And it actually didn't throw an error. I'm actually surprised by that. It actually converted it. I think I've been working in Java a little bit too much. That normally that would throw an error in that language, but I apologize about that.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, so the multiplication operator actually casted it to a number. So we don't actually have to modify this. I was going to have you put a plus sign here or a toEnt to demonstrate that. But this would be a better practice too, making sure that you're casting your values to a number by saying parse int, or you can also do number. There's several ways to make this into a number. These all do the same thing, or you could just put a plus sign, and that would also work the same way.
So parse int number and the plus sign. All of the same thing.
Yeah, they all do the same thing. Yes, Omar.
So just from my understanding, how did it turn a string into a number? Just with some backend with Java knows, or
I actually it just seen that this was going to be a multiplication, so it
okay.
knew that this was going to have to be a number.
That's what I'm thinking. It was just
Yeah,
just basic logic, and that's why it turned into.
yeah, and we can see that happen if we do this in the browser here. I can actually start declaring variables and doing things with them, and it will show us previews of what the values look like. So if I say let a equal, I did that backwards, let a equal 5, and then let b equal, we'll do 5 as well. So now if I do a plus b, we can see down below here that it's a string. But if I make this multiplication, we can see that it converted it into a number. So you can see the difference here, because this doesn't have quotes around it in the preview, but this does have quotes around it in the preview. So it is casting that to a different data type. And also, if we were to just put the extra plus sign there, that wouldn't do anything in this case, but if we weren't sure of the data types, then that could make a difference. Something too that's kind of weird with JavaScript, sometimes you'll see things like this. If I had a plus here and then put a times here, this first part was a string when this was converted. Oh, sorry, no, this would be order of operations. I'd have to actually put this in parentheses to make that work. There we go. So it'll add these two together as a string, and then it converts this into the rest of it into a number. So you do get some weird behavior like that with JavaScript. It's just one of those weird things where you might get weird results because of the way that your data is coming in. So in this case, we have one piece here that's a string. So instead of this being 5 plus 5 equals 10, it converted it into 55, and then it got the multiplication operator. So we just did 55 times 5. So we actually converted this into a string by adding the two together, and then we multiplied by a number. So we had 55 times 5. Does that make sense why that did that? It's just one of those weird things when there's a lot of little like quizzes and stuff out there. You'll see like on social media, they're like, what's the output of this function? And yes, Omar.
Sorry, I'm just throwing too many questions. So technically, logically speaking, A plus B should not be 55, right? So it's a wrong calculation though.
Yeah, if I made this another plus here, then that corrects it because I'm converting B into a number.
Yep.
But because it does things in the order that they're happening, that's why I put the parentheses here. If I remove the parentheses, it'll actually multiply B times A, converting that B into a number, and then it will add A to that. So it's a little bit different.
25 plus 5, 30. Okay, then it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, but when I put the parentheses around it, the parentheses make it so this happens first, and it'll add the string together first, and then it will do the multiplication. So data manipulation can be a little weird with JavaScript. That's why it's good to actually just throw those functions around your values sometimes. And it will throw errors occasionally as well, especially if you're trying to convert something that can't be converted. So that is something to watch out for, especially with strings. You'll see this a lot with strings. If we have the string hey dot to uppercase, that was lower. Now, if I ran this on a number as a value, that would throw an error. And we'll just take a look at that. And there's our syntax there. Because we're basically trying to run a function, the way it's probably actually seeing this is 5 dot, which is just a decimal value. And then it sees 2 local uppercase, which isn't actually a declared function. It just, yeah, you can't run this on that type of data type. So if, for example, if we had another value here, B, for example, we have B. So we can do 2 uppercase on B. And let me actually invoke it. So I ran the function on that just fine. It converted it just fine. But if I were to put a plus sign at the beginning of this, let's see what happens then. It evaluated it from right to left, so that was good there. But what I'm going to do is actually just reassign V then. So we'll say B equals 5. That wasn't a 5. There we go. And then I'll try to run this one more time, and we get that error. So this is typically what you'll see whenever your data type gets manipulated, and then you're trying to call functions on it, especially when you have data coming in from users, and that does throw errors. And that's where we use that error handling to kind of deal with those situations. So we would have a block that says try. I'll do this in VS Code, so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to do something in here that throws an error. We'll say try. And I'll do let A equal 5 as a string. Let B, oh, not let, sorry. It would be A equals 5. And then we're going to do A dot to uppercase. So it doesn't really know what the data type is. It doesn't keep track of what's happening here. It does see on initialization that A was a string. It doesn't keep track of the reassignments though. So this right here will throw an error. So then what we do is we catch the error. and we can console.log error. So this might look like a little weird syntax, but think of it like an if-else statement. We can say, if this throws an error, then do this instead. And that's how I like to look at these try-catch blocks, is just as a different way to do an if-else. If this is a error-prone code, then we'll do this instead. So whatever this logic down here might be, you don't necessarily just want to log the error to the console. You might want to perform different logic entirely, especially like maybe we have a function that's getting user input. I'll create one. So here's our user input function. And what I can do is say, we'll actually make this a value here, input, or sorry, that's Python, prompt. And then we put our string in here. What is the number? And what did I mess up here? Why we got red? I'll just bring this into the function so that it doesn't do that. Oh, I think it's because I had a semicolon at the end of it. So prompt, what is the number? I'm going to put this into a variable. We'll just say answer. I keep typing this backwards. Answer. I got a little bit of dyslexia today. And then we'll return the answer. So here's our function that's just designed to get user input. So what I would want to do is I want to invoke it here. And then inside of here, we're going to check that answer. So I would just say, I'll just console.log it for now. And we would assume that this answer is receiving an error from that's causing this error here, even though it's actually not doing that. I'm just going to simulate that it is. And then what we could do instead is catch the function again and give them a second chance to actually get the correct answer. So what we're doing is we're sending the function here. We're going to try the logic out. And then we're going to assume that the answer, this function here, is what caused the error to occur based on user input. We'll say they put in a number when they were supposed to put in a string. We tried to uppercase a number and we caught the error, and then we send it again. We say, hey, you messed that up, try this again. So we give them one more chance in this case. If they get it wrong again, we don't have another try catch we're not looping right here. We could put a while loop around all of this and do it that way as well. But this just gives them one more try. If they don't get it the second time, it throws another error, it just breaks the app in this case. So it's not the most robust way to manage an error, but it does give you kind of an example of how you could handle something like this. So we have a function that's designed to get user input. We're invoking the function. We're throwing an error, and then we're catching the error and recalling the function. Let me just hit go live here. I don't have this linked in anywhere.
And Louis, could you, I heard before you got into that you was talking about some quizzes out there. Is it possible you could share those with me so I could definitely practice more?
The ones I was referring to are usually just people on social media will just make a post that says, what do you think the output is? But I can share something with you that you can practice on. And that's W3 Schools.
Oh, okay.
Have you been on this site at all?
Yes, we was using it a lot last semester.
So were you using it for documentation or were you using it for quizzes?
We was using it just for documentation, like how to understand CSS and Java and HTML and stuff like that.
This has quizzes too. So I just came to their homepage and I'm going to click on JavaScript here in their navigation. And I'm going to scroll down and let me find
at the bottom of the page, it asks you about answers. It does. It says, what do you think the answer would be? I've seen that before on the W3 page.
Yeah, it was start using, so let me go back here. Start learning JavaScript now. And then we can scroll down and there should be a quiz in here. I don't remember 100% where it was, but it is in this general area. There's just some basic logic there. It might be at the bottom of all of this. I'm sure if we searched for it, here it is, JavaScript quiz on the left under JS examples.
Oh, word.
Yeah, so you just hit start JavaScript quiz, and then you have a lot of nice stuff here. 25 question quiz. So, and it doesn't hurt to go back and review this. Even if you feel like you're really comfortable with JavaScript, come back to the basics every now and then, because you might be surprised how much like really basic syntax you do forget. Even with a lot of experience, you might forget like some really simple stuff that you thought that you could never forget because it's so simple. But you don't use some of this stuff every day. So you will lose some of it eventually. All right, looks like we're linked in. I'm going to put a little bit of content in here just so I can see it on the page. And then I'll hit go live. I went to the wrong side. I'll do an inspect console and reference error string check is not defined. I think we have some extra code in here. Where's my string check function? There it is. Okay, so it's asking me for a prompt. I'm going to put in 5. And then it's asking me for a prompt again. And I'm assuming this is because it threw an error. So I'm going to hit OK again. And there we can see the error. Uncaught reference error. Age is not defined. So this is the interesting thing about these catch statements is you can make your own custom errors. I told it to print this out, so it printed it out. But I'm actually going to change what's being printed out now. So where did my catch statement go? There it is. We're just invoking the function again. I'm going to say console.error, and I'm just going to say there was a big mistake. So I will run this again. I'm going to hit cancel, and there we can see that error message. There was a big mistake. So you can make your own custom error messages this way. It's really helpful whenever you get things going. Okay, Laquanda, that's fine. Whenever you get things really going on big applications, having these custom error messages really can help you discover where things are happening. Seeing that you have a type error and then trying to follow a trace all the way back to where the error started can be a bit cumbersome. But if you start throwing in these custom error messages saying this logic is occurring within my function for handling strings, something along that line, something really descriptive, and having this red syntax around it makes it pop. So you'll be able to find it. Also, we can open this up and see the line number and the file and that sort of thing. You can also add more information to these as well. We just have the basic stuff here. Does anyone have any questions about the try catch block at all? Really good for debugging. I'm going to get back into our little code review here. I see Ryan next. Ryan, do you want to tell me what the output of this console.log here would be?
Let's see. The output would be blue.
No.
No?
No, try again.
Colors. Oh, right. 0, 1, 2. It would be. I'm not sure if it would be null or undefined. Probably undefined.
Let's try it.
Because identifier colors has already been declared.
That is not what we're looking for. Let's try a different browser tab. There we go.
Undefined.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that threw me off.
Yeah,
that's because the script ran.
That threw me off for a second because I forgot that arrays start at 0.
Yeah, that was on purpose. But yes, that is going not to be blue. It's going to be nothing because we didn't define a fourth element within here. So one thing that kind of helps me too, just to kind of think about this without really thinking about it, is when you're counting in an array, we always say that we count from 0. Think of it more as when your array starts, we haven't shifted any of the data yet. So this is the first element. So this is the beginning of the list or the array. Whenever you want to get to the next value, you're offsetting by 1. So this is value 1. To get to the next value, you're offsetting by 2. So this is where it starts, and then this is the offset. So think of those as offset rather than the element numbers. And it makes it a little bit easier to comprehend. And it's one of those things where you just kind of have to start reminding yourself of that as you're thinking about indexing. Think of it as, instead of indexing, as offset. So this is the beginning, offset of 1, offset of 2. And it makes it just a little bit easier to comprehend, even in an experienced level. Thinking about the numbering system, nobody actually counts from 0. So it's just awkward to try to do that. You'll start counting and then you lose count because you think that, you should be at a certain, like you can see there's 3 here and you're trying to count, and it's actually hard sometimes because your mind wants to say 3, but you're starting from a different number. So think of offset. We have no offset. We have 1 offset. We have 2 offset. And it makes it just a little bit easier to navigate through an array. But again, it takes practice to get your mind to think like that, because that's also not a natural thought, thinking about offset. But it has helped me. You can try to adopt it if you want. It's a tool for you. Take it or leave it. Let's move on to the next piece of code. All right, so section 4, it looks like Gregory is up. Are you there, Gregory? I see your camera's off. Nope, your mic came unmuted. All right, I don't hear you though. All right, doesn't seem to be any audio coming from you. I'll come back to you. Oh, there you go.
There I go.
All right. So you want to talk to me about section 4 here? What's going on?
All right, using let for student equal name, alias, age 20 is enrolled. True. The console.log, it'll be the name, the student name, alias, and 20.
All right, so let's back up a little bit. How would you describe what's happening just on line 40 by itself? Like if you were going to be describing this to a senior developer.
I don't know the exact name I would say it, but
and that's okay. We're just trying to get a little more familiarization with that terminology. So this is a variable assignment. This is an assignment operator, and this syntax here is referring to an object. So you're assigning the variable student to an object.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I know what you like. I could tell you knew what you were talking about, but we just want to try to get some of that terminology out there too. What do you call these? Each one of these? Because these aren't variables. There's a few different names for them.
I know it too. I can't think of it right now.
Yeah, putting you on the spot, it doesn't make it easy. We can call them properties. That's the name I prefer to use for them. I've also heard them called fields. I can't think. There's actually a third name that is pretty common. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. But yeah, properties is the most accepted name for a JavaScript object. So each one of these is a property. And then how about the data types? What kind of data types do we have for each of these properties?
Alex, a string.
Yeah, that's a string.
Age 20, and
what is 20? What kind of data type is 20?
Number.
Number, yep. And then you remember the name of this one?
True. I remember. I can't.
Yeah, it's the weird word. It's just saying true or false. We call it a Boolean.
Yeah, Boolean.
Yep. And we can see that when I highlight the properties themselves. We can see it says this property named is enrolled is a Boolean. And I can see that with name. It tells us this too because sometimes these are actually variables being passed in. So I could say age equals 20, and then I could say age equals age. So a little bit different there, but we can still see that age is a number. So without actually having to find this variable in our code somewhere, we can use our tools to highlight over this and see what is the data type of this value here. Is this going to be a string age? Because maybe we wanted to store it as a string. Maybe this is coming from a database and going to a database, and the database uses strings instead of numbers for some reason. Or is it a number? So we want to know that so that we can use certain methods on it. Is enrolled. We can see it's true here, but if this was a variable, we might not be able to see that. And this could say yes or no instead of true or false. So that's good to know. How do we refer to this type of syntax right here? Or how describe this to somebody, how we're accessing this property?
I know, but I can't.
So I'll typically call this the square bracket notation. It's also referred to as variable notation. Interestingly here, we have a variable being passed into this now. So with the original syntax of this, this actually doesn't return anything. It looks like it's returning age, right? So let me throw this into the browser and I'll show you what happens. A lot of these are tricks. It's just to kind of get you thinking. It's already been declared. I have to go to the other one. There we go. So there we got age is not defined. But we also can see that I'm trying to assign age there. Let's fix that because maybe that seems like I'm trying to trick you now. We still get age is not defined. And that's because when you're using the square bracket notation, you have to use a string. And now we get 20. So a bit of a trick question there. If we were using dot notation, it would look a little differently. We could do console.log student.age. And now I don't have to put age in a string. In fact, if I did, it wouldn't work. I still get the same result. But that's just something to remember with this. The reason you would put age in a string is because using square bracket notation allows you to make dynamic choices with your objects and pass actual variables to this. So what that could look like is if I say let word, I'm just using a random word for my variable name, equal the string age. And then I can say console.log student square brackets, pass in the variable word, which we know is not a property on my object, but age is a property and word is assigned to age. So it actually can find that. Now, where this is really useful is if you're looping over an array of data and you can pass every value of that array into these square brackets as a variable, and then you can loop quickly over an object like that. So you can go through all the different properties. So if you had an array of each one of these, I could actually, let me hide that. I'll say, we'll create the array equals, and we're just going to put strings in this array. It's a little weird without my autocomplete now. I got kind of spoiled by that. Age and is enrolled. So here's an array. And now I'm going to loop over this array using the for each loop. So I'm just going to call these properties, or I'll call them props. You can call this whatever you want when you're using the for each loop. We'll put our callback in here, and then I'll console.log the student, and then we'll pass in the props. And there we get all three values from that one little bit of code there. So I just iterated over a non-iterable doing it that way. Something that you normally can't do. What I mean by that is you can't loop over an object unless you use a for in loop. The for in loop does sort of let you loop over the object. It just counts the items and then you can convert those into keys. Or you could use methods to turn all of the properties into keys and then loop over the keys as an array. There are ways to get around it, but directly an object is not an iterable. The reason it's not an iterable, and what I mean by iterable is there's no way to put these in an order that you could loop over. Because the way this is stored in memory, if you have 3 different objects stored in one spot in your memory, putting this one last might not be more efficient. Within your actual memory module, it might be more efficient to move this up one line and then put another object beside it, and it would kind of fit together like a puzzle in your computer. So these are always going to be in a different order every time it stores the objects. And as you add more objects, it may rearrange one to fit another one to make things more efficient. So you never know how these are going to be arranged. They might not be in the same order that you coded them in. In our case, they're just happen to be the same. But yeah, sometimes they're not. Whenever you were to, let me actually just console.log and double check it. It might actually not be the same. I never confirmed that. So we have name, age, Boolean. So yeah, in this case, they did come out to be the same, but sometimes you see your age come out first and then name and then is enrolled. It just depends on what's more efficient in the memory. So when I say that an object is a non-iterable, that's what I'm referring to. You can't loop over objects unless you're using a for in loop and then it makes it into an iterable, it converts it. But that's a whole different thing. When it pulls it out of the memory, it'll actually change it from an object to an iterable temporarily. So you do have to do things to make it work, but it's by definition, it's a non-iterable. But here, I did iterate over it because arrays are iterables. These are stored in an order 0, 1, 2. So I'm able to iterate over this 0, 1, 2 here and pass these in, name, age, enrolled. And it allows me to print each one of those out like that. Does anyone have any questions about how I did that? This for each loop, you may not remember it. I don't know if Robert would have covered this too in depth. This is an array method that just replaces a for loop. So instead of having to do the let I equal 0 and all of that, you can just loop over things. If you're not familiar with the for each loop, definitely maybe get on YouTube and tonight and watch a video about it. Super useful method. It doesn't return anything. It just loops over and does stuff to whatever you're working on. So keep that in mind. If you wanted to return something, you'd have to use a different method, such as reduce or map or filter. Filter returns things. Depends on what you're trying to do. All right, so let's move to the next one. Here we have a function. All right, so next I see Iris. You're up, Iris. What can you tell me about this function?
On number 5.
Yes.
Okay, we're creating a greeting. So it's gonna greet name, return hello with a space, plus the name, which whoever enters with an exclamation mark behind it.
Yes.
And I keep getting values stuck in my head instead of property.
Values, when you're referring to objects, you mean?
Yeah.
So this is a value, and this is a key. Keys and values make up properties. So you're right there. You're close to it. Let's go back to this here. So you said you make a greet. Let's use the terminology here. We're declaring a function called greet. What is this called? This name?
That's the object, isn't it?
This is a parameter.
See?
Different P word.
Yeah.
So this is a parameter, and we can see that on the tooltip there.
Yeah.
And what data type does this take?
What data type does it stay in?
What data type will name be whenever we call this function?
I'm drawing a blank.
Which primitive data type, if that helps? Did you say alphabet?
Yeah.
Yeah, string. Since the alphabet is a string, yeah. That's what we would want it to be. But we can
not
see
having
here.
the parentheses threw me off.
This area here is telling us that it could be any data type. So if you passed a number into this function, it would work. It would just concatenate a number into here. If you passed a Boolean in or anything like that, it would convert all those to strings. So it'll take any data type, but a string would be the best thing to use in this function just because of what it does. Yeah, and then the return keyword. Oh yeah, go ahead. What was your question?
Nope, I lost it.
All righty.
Okay.
If you think of it again, just let me know. The return keyword. What can you tell me about the return keyword in a function?
The return keyword is what causes, it's the function that says print this out.
It doesn't print it out. What it actually does is it takes the value that's within the function and it makes it accessible to place into a variable or use in an expression. So I could say const user equals greet. Now this might not look all that great because of how I'm doing this. We'll put Bill in here. So I'm invoking the function here and I'm assigning a value to a variable. What value is getting assigned to this variable right here?
What value? Bill is the user.
Bill is the user, but look at the function. What are we returning?
Stop it. I'm not understanding the question.
So whatever is being returned from the function is what gets assigned to the variable value. So when we look at this function, we're going to look at line 49. Everything to the right of the return statement will be stored on this variable right here. And I used the variable user just to kind of try to throw you off a little bit because I thought you might say Bill. But what I wanted you to look at was the return statement and see if you see the whole string. So it'll actually say hello, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I would have said greeting here instead, you would have probably knew immediately that it's returning this. But I just wanted to see, you know, I like to throw people off with, you know, sometimes my variable names on the spot like that.
You're very good at it.
Yeah, and I do apologize, but it does get you thinking. That's the idea. I'm not trying to like make anyone feel bad or anything like that. It's just to kind of get you thinking more. And it'll help in the end, I hope.
Yes.
And if not, then I apologize for if I made you feel bad. All right, next section here. Jordan, do you want to tell me what's going on in section 6?
Section 6 is an if statement
It is an if statement, yes.
with our parameters saying student dot age greater than 18.
Yeah, what do we call this right here? This parameter.
Is that as a variable student from up above, and the value
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I seen a hand go up.
age.
So I meant the whole overall piece here. Do you know what the term is that would describe this entire thing?
Not offhand, no.
All right, so this is referred to. Oh, Laquanda, did you want to answer? I see your hands up. Did you say a conditional? I'm sorry, your mic was really quiet. I'm sorry, I still couldn't hear you.
Sorry. No.
Yes, you sound a little louder now. Yes, what was your guess at this?
A conditional statement?
A conditional is one name for it. I was looking for Boolean expression, but conditional is not wrong. If you said conditional, I would have accepted that as well. So that is a good guess. If that's what you said, Laquanda, then great. I see your hand still up. Did you want to try something or say something? Okay, it looks like you're still muted. So we'll move on, Jordan. Do you want to talk to me about the conditional here? Like, what is actually going to be output?
So the output, if the number is greater than 18, it'll read out the student's name as a string, and the rest of the strings will say is an adult.
Yeah, and what will the actual output be if I ran this right now? Like if I drop this in the browser and hit play, what would it say? Which one of these would it pick? And what would the student name show up as? You might have to look at line 38 for a hint. And then
It's
from there to 42.
So if you ran it, since the age is 38, it's 20.
No, not the, the age is 20. I thought you said the age is 38. Yeah, the age is 20, which I guess it doesn't change the condition.
The age is 20.
Yeah,
And
and we're
since
assigning
that
the
is-
age here.
Reads as an adult, so the if statement will not run unless we change the age to like 16 or something.
Yeah, or change the condition.
Right.
What name would show up?
From above, Alice.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the kind of things I want you to look at whenever you're analyzing code and you see a variable like this. You should be asking yourself, what is student.name? Where does that come from? And then, you look up here at the object, student name, Alice. Okay. So this is either going to be Alice as an adult or Alice as a minor. All right. So what is the student age? That's assigned here. It's being assigned to a variable. All right. Here's the variable. The student age is assigned to 20. So this is going to say that Alice is an adult. So that's kind of how you'd want to analyze something like that, and then read that back to somebody who you're presenting this for. All right.
What would be an argument for that? Is the else an argument or?
There are no arguments in if statements.
Okay.
Okay, Laquanda, have a good night. Yeah, so when you're talking about expressions, the if statement only takes Boolean expressions. If we put if else right here, the if else statement will take a Boolean expression. So I could even say if else true. That is technically else if. I'm so dyslexic today. Else if true. This is a Boolean expression that results to a true. Or I could say the string H strictly equals the string C. This is always going to result to false, but it is a Boolean expression. So whatever this Boolean expression is, it needs to result to a single value, and that single value should either be a truthy or a falsy value. And I'm using the terms truthy and falsy. Those are actual words. I'm not making them up. They use them in the development world. What that would mean is if I say 0, 0 is considered falsy, and this is considered false in that case. Empty arrays, I actually forget. Let me double check. This is one that I always get mixed up on because objects and empty arrays have weird results. So if we say, probably the easiest way to test this is to just do loosely equals true. And we get false. And then if I put a value in there, we get true. So there's an easy way to test if something is truthy or falsy. You just say loosely equals true and check against it. So 0 loosely equals true, false. We can see that that's falsy. If I change this to a 1 or any number, it's going to be truthy. So these evaluate to a single value in the end. So 1 is true, or any number is true. Empty strings, we get false. So if you have an empty string, it's considered a falsy value. If I put a value in here, it's still false, apparently. Oh, sorry, that doesn't work with strings. Strings don't work for that because of the string itself being compared. So it's trying to see, is this also an empty string? Not, is this true? So that one's one to keep in mind. We can throw an if statement in here and put an empty string in it. And then we can do alert and say true. If it's true, this will work. And it didn't go off, so if statement is falsy. If I put a value in here, the alert went off, so we know that that's falsy. Or sorry, truthy. Does anyone have any questions about the truthy, falsy thing? And the thing that I said that was throwing me off is empty objects. Empty objects are truthy. Empty arrays are falsy. So they're a little different. And I think it's because empty objects are considered like a container. It's a box you can put things in, so they're always just kind of true. They have a lot of functionality. So I don't know. JavaScript is weird like that. It makes empty arrays falsy and it makes empty objects truthy. Just keep that in mind if you're using that shorthand like that. If you're just putting an empty array in here, a lot of times you'll put a variable here that represents an array. And if that array becomes empty, then it becomes falsy. And you can use this even in a while loop. You could say, I'll put it here at the bottom, while. Let me create an array real quick. We'll do const fruits equals apple, pear, banana. I'm going to put the logic in before I put the array in because I don't want to have an infinite loop. And then what I'll do is I'll say fruits dot pop. This removes elements from an array. I'm going to console.log the fruits array before I pop anything out of it. That way, every time this runs, we can see it happen. And I'll do it afterwards too, just so we can see before and after. Fruits. And then I'm going to put the fruits array right here, just by itself. So while the fruits array, do all this. So this is going to be determining, is this array empty or not empty? And that's how I'm going to determine the condition of this while loop. So I save, and we go over here. Age is not defined. Let's fix that. This must be the one. I thought I actually fixed that earlier. So here we have, am I on a different page? Red, green, blue. Alice is an adult. I have a error here, so I need to move this logic up. Where did I leave off at? There we go. Line 71, so I should be above the error. So I would expect to see, there it is. It looks like it's infinite. While fruits doesn't seem to be removing, or it did remove everything. But apparently the while loop isn't respecting the infinite, or sorry, the faulty value. The if statements do. So I do apologize about that. But it's an easy fix. This is why I like to be explicit with this stuff, because you never know what's going to happen. We would do fruits.length. Let's see if we can use the sources to stop it. It doesn't look like it's going to let us, so I'm going to have to kill this tab before it kills my browser. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong thing. There we go. So we're using the falsy value by itself now. I couldn't use just the array. And again, this is one of those ones, the array is, we've seen that it was falsy, but it didn't work with the while loop. But we know that length results to a single value at the end. When this gets turned to 0, then 0 is falsy, so it breaks the loop. So it does the same thing. It gives you the same idea here. I'm not saying is length strictly equal or not strictly equal to 0. I'm just saying length, and it's just a 0 or a true. So that's where I was trying to get at with that. Things sometimes don't go to plan. That's just the way it is with JavaScript. Arrays, we've seen they were falsy, but yet it didn't break the while loop. So you just got to be careful. Probably don't just do this. Actually say while length is not equal to 0. Be very explicit with your stuff. You can do these shortcuts. They do work. They do look clean. But you just seen what happened. I assumed that it was going to break because I know that arrays are falsy, and it didn't break. Yes, Jeremy.
if you put if fruits is equal to true, would that also work instead of to stop the while loop? Because I know at some after the fruits gets to having nothing in the array, it should equivalent to false, and it's no longer true here. So if you put fruits equals true, not the
Yeah, let's
like
give it a
that,
try.
or the
Yeah, that works. Threw an error somewhere.
is it 3 equals, not 2?
I used 2 because we didn't want to do type checking. This is equal to false right now. If I invert it, then we're in an infinite loop. So it didn't work because it said it was false. I set it to true and it never switched back to false. Interesting. I need a new browser tab now. Good question. Yeah, and I think I might have just started did I start another loop now? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and remove this while loop. Yeah, great question. I do like experimenting around with stuff like that. There's always like, what's this output type of thing? It's a little bit more interesting than sometimes just straight building out applications. Those little nuances can really make or break whenever you're getting deep into applications. We have, how many people do we have left? I think 2. Let me get my list open here. It lets me open it back up. There it is. Jeremy, you're up actually.
All right, so here we're creating a for loop. We initiate I at 0, and we check we're on section 7, correct, loops?
Yes.
Okay, section, yes. So we have a for loop. We initiate I to equal 0. It is confined to the for loop.
You just muted there when you said confined to the for loop.
Yeah, sorry. It's confined to the for loop, and then it checks the I if it's less than the length of colors, which in this case is 2, and then it'll increment I, passing it by 1. Each time it console logs, it'll check colors at index of I, and in this case, it's going to start at 0, so it should just print out each fruit each color in the colors array.
Yeah, let's take a look at that color array.
And
yep,
so it'll iterate it. It should iterate total of 3 times, starting at 0, ending at 2, and print out red, green, and blue.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. How would you describe this right here? This word console. What is this?
That is, I'm not exactly certain how I would describe that.
I'll give you a hint. If you call this a method, what would you call this?
Is that?
Or if I were to do type of on the console itself, do you know what that would come up as? So open up the browser and you can take a look. It's okay if you didn't know, because that's kind of a niche question. A lot of people don't think about. I keep spelling type wrong. Type of. Still spelling it wrong. We'll just type in console. Oop, it didn't work. Type of console. It doesn't like that. Well, console.log it. It says no. All right, so none of my code is working. Let me refresh. I'll just open a new tab. I don't know what's going on with localhost there. Might have an infinite loop or something going on still that I didn't catch. I will try that again. Type of console. There we go. It's an object. So that's what I'm trying to get at is console's an object and .log is a method. So methods are functions that live within objects.
Okay. I didn't
Yeah.
realize the console was considered an object because I've never, like, even the first time anybody's asked me what the console itself was considered.
Yeah, so it's one of those things like anything that has dot notation is probably an object is a good way to look at it. But here's something very interesting that you probably haven't done before. Type of null. That's an object. How about that? It's a primitive data type, but it's an object, so it's not a primitive data type. It's one of those weird things that null is an object because it was built using a class, and it has properties that describe what null means, and it just means that it's empty. So it's just the way they had to structure and build out this property. It ended up making it an object, even though it's not
Well,
actually an object.
It's like you're, instead of saying empty, you're going about it in a roundabout way to say that it's empty, using an object to be able to print it out saying that it is.
Exactly. Yeah, it is a roundabout way. But because of how JavaScript is created around objects. And every object has properties and methods. And well, not necessarily properties and methods, but they all have properties, something that describes what it means. So instead of just having a value that you're assigning null, they have something that describes under the hood what is null, like what does it mean fundamentally. And that's why it comes up as an object when you do type of. It's not really that important, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. We can also do type of. Here's another interesting one, NaN. What do you think this is going to be? So NaN stands for not a number. If I type
Would
this,
it be like before object as well? Because it's also
it's a number also. Not a number is a number. It's one of those ones I like to do just because you wouldn't expect not a number to be a number whenever you're checking the type of, but it is. And it's because if you do things that you shouldn't do to numbers, like 40 divided by 0, I guess that one says infinity now. That's all right. That's expecting not a number for that. There's a lot of things, though, that you can do that are illegal in math. If you do an illegal formula, it'll come back as not a number. Let me think of an object thing. 6 times an object, not a number. So things like that. This isn't valid math, so it just says not a number. But not a number is a number. And the reason not a number is a number is because you don't want things to start throwing errors if it's expecting numbers. So this is kind of a safety net that prevents things from breaking based on data types. So it'll assume you probably wanted a number here. So we're going to give you NaN, and allow your code to continue to run as much as it can. But we're not going to do any more math with this because you can't do math on NaN. I could try all day long, and it's not going to ever change anything. It'll always return NaN. All right, and then last we have, where did you go, Daniel? You want to pick any of these here, Daniel? Any you feel comfortable with? Since we have 3 left, and unless did I miss anybody? I didn't miss anybody, did I? No, you're it.
I'll go ahead and do section 8.
All right.
We see that let uppercase message, that's a variable being declared. And we can see that it's declaring, or we can see that it has a string welcome. And then we can see that that string has a method attached to it, 2 uppercase. What that does essentially, from what I think it does, is it just makes the word uppercase. And then we can see in the console log, it's logging that variable uppercase message, and it should just say welcome with a capital W.
Yeah, exactly. So with this method here, if this is a method and this is a string, and I said that all objects or all methods live on objects, how come this primitive data type has a method attached to it? Do you know?
No, I really don't know.
Do you maybe remember me mentioning the prototype? So if I bring up, yeah, let me just bring up a string here. I'll just type in hey. It's not going to let me open it. The prototype is, I might be able to just bring up the actual string. I wonder if I can declare a new string. Yeah. So now I can open it up. So this is the actual string. I created it with the new string constructor. But this right here is the prototype I was talking about. So you can see this sometimes whenever you're looking at objects. Primitives have a prototype, which is how they have methods. The prototype is an object that lives in the data type. And we go in here and we can see all of the different methods that live inside of the string. So here's our to uppercase method right here. It lives on an object inside of the string primitive. So it's pretty cool. And this syntax right here, this is for instantiating objects. There's a string class that's basically a string builder, and we use that to create this custom string. And we can actually see whenever you create a custom data type, it tells you the data type, and then it shows you the actual value after that. We can create our own custom data types later as well. But this is what I mean. This is kind of how null works. Whenever null has all those different properties that describe it, except null has no properties to describe it, if that makes sense. It's a description of nothingness. So you basically take something like this and you just don't put anything in it and it's null. So that's pretty much it as far as the code review. We're going over on our hour, so I want to get our 10-minute break in. But before I do, I just want to see if anyone has any questions. So hopefully we're feeling a little more comfortable with like error messages and debugging. This all ties back to the developer tools. As you can see, we've been in the console here, looking at error messages, breaking things. I've had some while loops going like crazy. I'm glad that happened because it gives us an opportunity to try to solve those little problems and stuff. And that's what this week's all about, is debugging, using our dev tools and getting more familiar with this type of stuff. And hopefully you're feeling more comfortable a lot too with this terminology and just reading code in general. I think that's a good exercise, especially if we do it like 10, 15 minutes at the beginning of each day, just a quick, whatever we can get out of the way in that amount of time. I went a little longer on today with it just because I wanted to really show these different error messages. And I had a lot more examples too to cover other than what I just got here, but we don't have time to go into them because I still need to get into the review of basically yesterday's assignment for the most part. All right, so I'm going to start the 10-minute timer, and then we get back. We'll go over, the Lighthouse application again. We'll just kind of give a quick rundown on that. We'll go back into performance and network just so we're feeling pretty comfortable with those concepts. And then after that, we can dive into the assignment. All right, I'll start the 10-minute timer, and I'll see you then. Okay, welcome back. So the second half, we're gonna change gears a little bit. We're just gonna kind of review yesterday, kind of how you would get through yesterday's assignment in a way, but not really like, because it's gonna be different for everybody. Everybody's gonna have a different capstone, have different issues to find. But I'm just gonna go to a website and just run a normal check on it. We might have some time to get into some more of this code reviews. I don't think getting through this bit will take all that long. Then we can get into the assignment. Today's assignment should be fairly quick. I don't want to say quick because if you might get stuck on one or two of them, but it should be very straightforward as far as what we need to do. So as far as the review on the performance, I can just start right here on Google. We would want to, if we're going to be running an audit, we'd first want to check the console for errors. So I refresh the page. Let me actually go to their homepage here. Here we can see we have an error. We have a permissions policy violation. This is probably a custom error message. I don't think I've ever seen this in JavaScript anywhere. So this is something that they created using a try catch block and a console.error. It probably wasn't from Google itself. It was probably from a third-party provider that they were using. So these are things you want to be looking at. Here we can see they have a whole stack in here. This is what I mean by you can add more things when you do a console.error. You can put a whole bunch of things in here on their own lines. I believe you just use the /n for new line to do that. We have their whole stack error here. Anyway, so to start the audit, this is the first thing you want to check. Do you have any errors in your console? Also, it doesn't hurt to kind of just skim through the code here. Take a look at the actual elements. We can see these class names. What I'm looking for in particular is things like this: style display none. So I don't know what this is. I want to remove the style and just see if it changes anything on the page. It's meaningful. I don't see any difference. The text area, it's down here off the page somewhere. There it is. So we can play here right now. I don't know what this is for, but there's a text area randomly on Google that was hidden. It might be for on mobile devices. Maybe it toggles between two different text areas. But these are kind of the things I like to look for whenever I'm going through and analyzing a site. Is this really needed to be here? Or could this be removed from the DOM completely so we don't have to load this? Because every little bit of code you load does take time. So I like to analyze everything and just kind of look at all this stuff. Here's a script in the middle. This is minified code, which is actually a good thing that this is minified. It is an inline script. These aren't that uncommon. We don't typically write them in this class just because we're trying to teach you the strict mode version of JavaScript. And when you're writing inside of these script elements, strict mode doesn't really apply unless you encapsulate everything within a function, but then your function's not encapsulated in the strict mode. So it's kind of a complicated thing. We have an iframe. Iframes are very performance hard. So I don't see where this is at. It's not highlighting anything on my page. But anytime you have an iframe, this means that you have a web page typically loaded inside of your web page. You can load through the iframe. I set the display none, which is probably why I don't see anything. We'll see what this actually brings up. So here's another page inside of the page. I don't know where this goes or what it's for. But yeah, an iframe is another web page on top of your web page. They hit the performance really hard. It looks like it's something to do with cookies. So they just have this thing here. Who knows what Google's doing? It's a big corporation with really smart developers. So it probably does have a really clever purpose. We can open up some of these. Other things I'm looking for are other hard styles. We have some more display nones. Here's a span. Let's see what's inside this span. This is also set to display none. They have a lot of stuff on here. Some of these data elements are attributes. There's a data ATSD, data MMCNT. What these allow you to do is kind of set up variables inside of your HTML. It's something that you can hook onto and grab the values out of. And then you can update these data elements through HTML based on inputs in an input form. You can actually be updating these without any JavaScript. but then you can later have your JavaScript interact with these. So they are really handy. I don't think they're very hard on the performance, so I'm not too worried about them. But if you do see a lot of random stuff like this, that's what that's for. It's just for JavaScript to grab data out of your actual HTML. They're storing values here for you. It could cause it to load faster too, I suppose, if they have a lot of their data moved into the HTML, and the HTML can load quickly. Yeah, I don't see anything else here that really sticks out to me as far as making this more performant, but let's take a look at the head. We have a lot of metadata in here. We have a lot of scripts. I don't see anything really sticking out as far as anything wrong with the metadata. Some of these metadatas here, these are typically just used, again, as like a variable. You store the information in the meta of the HTML document, and then whenever you load this through JavaScript, you can grab, for example, this image here and load that on somewhere else on your page. So you're basically able to loop through all of these meta contents and grab whatever you need. So they'll do that sometimes. There's some sort of hash there. And yeah, I'm not sure what this one does. All right, so now let's move on to the performance tab. This is where I would head next. And I would just kind of run through a recording of this and just try to see all the functionality. So I don't want to click on any links. I just want to look at their functionality. So I might collapse the page down, open it up. I don't think this goes to anywhere. So that's pretty much all of the functionality here. There's some highlights, hovers. This does some stuff when you hover over it, it changes sizes too. I don't see something else I like to look at is my scroll bar. Whenever I'm hovering on things, does it move my scroll bar when the content size changes? Is the page dynamically growing and shrinking? Because that can be a little jarring for the user. So that's definitely a good thing to look at. These underline when you highlight them. This one has some sort of background color that goes around it. This gets a 5-pixel border around it. We have some things here we can type in now. And that looks like, yeah, that looks like all of the functionality on the page to test. I don't see anything else that I can interact with. So I'll stop that. Let's go ahead and expand this out. So what we'd want to do then is just kind of look through here, see if there's anything basically that doesn't look good. This overall timer is the timeline of the entire recording. So this was my pretty early on assessment of me interacting with things. I didn't refresh the page before I started this. That's something that you can consider as well. We can see there was an interaction here. Let's go ahead and drop this down. We have some layout shifts. This is what I was talking about. Whenever the page is changing sizes, it's actually moving the layout around. So recording for layout shifts is really useful. If you have content moving your page, moving this page like this isn't really that helpful to determining whether you have a negative content shift versus this sort of content shift. This is what I would call a fluid layout. This is perfectly acceptable, perfectly fine that the page is shifting because it needs to. Otherwise, the content doesn't fit. So we do want a content shift in this case. But if I were to highlight this button and it would cause, say, these links down here to rearrange themselves because I'm highlighting up here, that would be a bad content shift. You don't want something like that. So sometimes you have things like accordions, which cause your page to expand and grow. You want to leave enough room for that accordion to fully open without jarring your page open further. If you can. There's times that you can't avoid that. But that right there is what I'm looking at is content shifts. That's something we want to keep an eye out for. And we can see particular what was shifting at which time, what happened to cause the content shift. So very useful tool there to see. Timings, this is just showing us our clocks. I don't think there's anything else in here that really, the network stuff we can look at in the network tab. It's the same information. So I don't really like using this because you have to zoom way in to actually get any use out of it. So here we can see this page loaded at that time. Scroll all the way back out, and then you got to scroll all the way back in over here now, and then we can see what was happening there. So again, this is just kind of weird to use because you got to keep playing with the scroll. But we can see some information up here on top in this timeline still. Again, this is still based on our recording, so maybe you do get some value out of this if you have APIs being hit whenever you're interacting with your page. You can see how those are responding as well. So maybe we have a weather application and we don't want to update the weather until we hit like an accordion and open up a window or open up a drawer. And we could say, just click on a town and it'll drop down a menu and show you the weather. Then you could grab the weather only whenever you open the drawer. And that would save performance on the initial page load. All right, so that's it for performance. Next thing I'm going to go into is the network. So the network, we want to look at this stuff on page load. Let me do a refresh. And what we want to look for is the waterfall here. This is the first thing I look at is the waterfall. And I look for things that have really big bars. So what was causing the delay? Here we can see we have some information to look at. Our waterfall gives us quite a bit of information. We can also zoom in and try to get a better look at this type of thing. We have this as well. We can expand this out and try to map this a little differently. We can select by dragging and dropping. So let's do another refresh and get a fresh paint. And we're just going to look at 200 milliseconds here. This search, let me see what this actually is. It looks like it's a script that loaded in. This had 371 bytes of data, which isn't really that big, considering what you can get up to. Let me see if I can zoom back in. It looks like I'm stuck on this size. There we go. Yes, Omar.
Yeah, how do we zoom in?
I hold Control, or was it Shift? Let me see. Yeah, Control, and I use my scroll wheel.
Scroll wheel, okay.
Yeah, and I think if you're on a laptop, you can do the same thing by using two fingers and sliding them apart and together while holding the Control key.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have to do it over this map. It doesn't work when I do it down here. So I'm not sure why. And it also kind of messes with the map because I'm now scrolled left and I shouldn't be, and it won't let me scroll. So sometimes I got to hit refresh in order to see everything again. So there, I want to look at this. Let's try that again. So looking at this paint here, this is this search script again, 356 bytes. It's being cut off on the left here because of my scrolling, and it looks like it's not behaving very well. Let me just move this. Cut on the bottom. That doesn't look much better, but we do get some information on it. And we could, if we had control over this stuff, then we might want to change some things. For example, I can see my profile picture loaded in here. It's a PNG file. We can see our status code was okay. It's loaded into the cache. So this right here actually could make it load quicker because, and this is probably why it actually is loading so fast. Let me actually do a hard reset. All right, so now things took a little bit longer. We can see the PNG actually loaded in. We can see that it had 2.3 kilobytes. I held Control-Shift-R in order to do that refresh. And instead of loading from cache, it'll load the data fresh. It looks like something here did still get cached and came in. Something from, I'm not sure what this is. I'm not familiar with Google's APIs, but it took no time at all to load. So yeah, this is basically the idea of just kind of analyzing this data, try to figure out what's really big and what can you cut down on. So if you have a lot of unused code, if you have a lot of CSS, and then after I'm happy with looking through all of this, also we can, as far as I forgot to mention, we can filter this. So for example, CSS, Google Fonts, that's a big one. If you're using Google Fonts, they take up so much space, so much memory. They're really, really slow. It's definitely better to use whatever fonts are built in with good support across both screens. It's argued across the industry on this. People will say, do what looks good, don't worry about performance when it comes to fonts. Others will say performance is more important. If you can use something close enough, just use that instead. So wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, you just would decide on, what you can and can't do, or whoever is working above you will decide. Either way, you'll be able to come to that determination one way or the other. Here's the images that loaded in. We have some 204s. That typically means no content. So I don't know if it was removing images or what it was doing there. And then finally, we're going to get into the Lighthouse report. The Lighthouse report, we seen this yesterday. This basically just gives us the rundown. It gives us all the notes. So I'll run that again here. And we can see it shifting around and everything. SEO is still kind of low. And we take a look at these scores. We have 100, 93, 95, 82. I'm going to look at the results for this first, and then I'm going to run it again on mobile, and we'll see what kind of differences we get. So this is the overall data. There's a lot more to it than just this, so don't get hung up on just this part here. A lot of times you'll come in here and you'll be looking at it, and then you're done. You just leave, and you didn't get a whole lot of value out of this. You want to look at the diagnostics. This is the most important part of the whole Lighthouse report. This is what can tell you what can actually solve problems in your stuff. So here we have, there's no initial scale. There's no viewport. We have very large JavaScript files. It looks like they're coming in from a CDN. CDN is Content Delivery Network. This means that it's going to grab the files from whatever server is closest to your computer. So CDN networks will store all of this data on servers across all of the different countries all around the world. And then when, for example, Bootstrap, they have CDNs for their CSS files, which is why we don't have to download their CSS. It'll deliver the Bootstrap content based on where you're located, which can cause it to load faster. And you don't have to necessarily download all of the Bootstrap when you're using the CDN. Let me just bring that up and show that to get Bootstrap. Just to remind you and show you what I mean. This NPM here is for Node. We don't have that access yet. But here we can see cdn.js deliver. And it's going from their NPM. And this is the version that it's grabbing. And then here we can see the actual CSS file. So it is grabbing an actual CSS file. It's very similar to whenever you go to raw code on GitHub. You could kind of create your own CSS file that way that's delivered through GitHub instead of having the file locally. So let's see what that would look like. We'll go to github.com. I'm just going to create a new repository for this. And we'll go to my demos. And I'm just going to do this as a reset. We'll just call it reset. We'll go to public. I will not initialize it with a read. Actually, yes, I will. I'll initialize it with a README. I'll just delete it later. I'm not going to clone this down. I'm going to do everything right here in the browser. And then I'm going to go get a reset. I'll grab both of those resets and put them in there. CSS, to be more specific. And I'm going to grab both of these resets and put them there. So we'll get this one first. Just grab this whole code block. And then we'll come back here, add file, create new file. And the file name will be reset.css. And we'll just paste it in. And I'm going to grab the other one now. So what I'm doing is I'm creating this file on a cloud-based service, and I'm going to make it so I can get access to it inside of my projects without actually having to have it downloaded. Now, this isn't the best solution for CDNs. You can use like Cloudflare, JS Deliver, things like that to actually deliver these. But I just wanted to show you what I mean by you can access this. We'll go to raw. And this right here is basically coming from a CDN at this point. So this is raw code. So now I can go to my index, and then I can put in, oops, sorry, just go to my index, and I can link that right in. CSS. and just paste in that link. And we can see the file right here is being delivered to my project. That would work the same as if I had the file downloaded, but it won't be as fast on the network side, but it will be faster on the file size because you're not going to have this stored on your repo. So it's just one of those things where you can do this if you want to. And let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let me check my JavaScript first. See if there's any infinite loops in here. I think we're good. So let's go to localhost. And we'll do an inspect and see if it found it. So it looks like we don't have any 404s or anything, so it did find it. The styles don't really seem like they're being placed in here, but I don't have enough stuff in here to really go off of it at the moment. But this is the style sheet. I might have to adjust the rail if I remember correctly in order to get this to work. But this is a way you can do it remotely. There's not really a good reason to do this unless you have all of your code in multiple locations and you're just trying to pull it together. I've did this a few times for JavaScript files. And again, it's just one of those things where you got to have a really weird use case for it. I just wanted to show you that it does exist. And it's kind of how Google does a lot of their stuff as well. When we were looking at their actual stuff here, they're pulling a lot of this stuff in from different servers. They're basically serving it the same way. But yeah, they use the CDN. They have their own version of it, and it'll base it on your location that way. Let's see, we're missing that. So these are the most important ones because they're in red. So usually a pretty good indicator. SEO, it probably isn't the most important thing for Google. But this part right here, this is accessibility. They probably should fix this problem because this deals with what kind of device are you on. And we can actually see that behavior too. We notice that it's not actually fitting very well on my small screen sizes. Let me go to mobile view and bring this down. And right there, we can see that it's starting to spill off to the sides and I have to scroll left and right. They could fix that to where all of this fits onto the page better. They could slide this to the left. They could make it a little bit larger, increase these font size, increase these up here. Let me zoom in on my actual browser. Let's see where my size is. Is anything telling me? Yeah, so this is probably not the best accessibility. I'm actually surprised Google doesn't do something about that because this right here is what they're using probably for their breakpoint. This is what they have set as media queries. And these are the breakpoints that are set. So yeah, they kind of just stopped at 319. Once you get too small, it just starts spilling off to the side. And they could do that. They could fix that if they wanted to. But I don't think they really care. And then some of this other stuff here. Serve static assets with an efficient cache policy. Not sure what this error means specifically, but a cache policy is whenever you have data coming from your server, once that data arrives, you can then store the state of that data on the server. So when you load in the next time, it loads, instead of loading from a database, it loads straight from the server, and it just speeds things up a little bit. So, but I'm not sure what they're referring to here specifically because I'm not familiar with Google's code base, but we can see that. Image elements do not have explicit width and height. I'm assuming this looks like it's that little leaf thing that we've seen load in. I'm not sure what this is for. It probably doesn't need an explicit width and height since it's so small. Let me take out this mobile view. So it looks like it's in their footer. It's just a tiny little icon. Yeah, right there it is. So yeah, again, they probably don't have any reason to put in any sort of width and height on that just because it's so small. But those are the kind of things you want to look for in the Lighthouse. We do have a few more minutes before I want to open up the breakout room. So I'm going to go over some of the code stuff that I wanted to, if we had time for still, because our assignment today is going to be focused around debugging. So just want to get you a little bit more practice in debugging before we break out and actually start working on that on our own. So let me open up my app.js. I'll just clear this out and drop in the demo for handling errors. It's basically the same thing as what we just did, but different snippets. There's a lot more broken. All right, so starting at the top here, I'm just kind of go through these. Anybody just want to just shout it out whenever you see the bug here, and I'll write a quick description in here what it is. This is basically how the assignment for today is going to go.
Yeah, heard everybody at the bingo place in bets about the car sinking. Any idea who won it?
You don't have a variable declared.
Anyway,
Exactly.
I know he's gonna keep looking. The dude, I mean, along with that girl.
And what kind of error would that cause?
He was backhanded and half-assed.
Do you remember?
Undefined variable.
That's me.
Yeah, so that's the description of the error, but there's a name for the error itself.
Stuffy laughs more.
So like syntax errors, type errors, reference errors, logic errors.
Them two likely high on that.
Would it be a reference error?
It'd be a
Reference
reference error. Yeah,
Look that up.
exactly. Nice.
Leaks up from the city.
So next one is, what do we see here with this?
He's one. Setting his bottle on the beaver's floor. Caleb Hawks reached the styrofoam cooler, pulled one, untapped it, and handed it over. Saying it was good going down.
There's something wrong. I can't.
He had been in the same clothes to that rumpled look, smelling of wood smoke.
What's that, Iris?
Then he hiked the river. Just felt like a walk.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. I forgot I turned the mic on.
Oh, okay. Yes,
It
there is
won't
something
be able
wrong.
to. It won't be able to give the length of the number.
Yeah, so numbers are primitives. Well, I
Well,
mean, I
it
guess,
can check on what strings, right? Or
yeah, if
maybe-
we put this as a string, then we could get the length of it. But numbers themselves don't have a length property. So that will throw what kind of error do you think?
logical error.
Logic errors are when the code works and it doesn't do what you expect it to. For example, if I did 5 plus 5, and if you expected this to be 10, that's a logic error. So this would actually be a type error. Because
Data
this,
type error, you mean?
what's that?
Type mean data type, right?
Yeah, the actual, like if I'll put this in the browser here and just show you. When it says type error, it's referring to the type of data that it's trying to interact with. Where'd my browser go? Here it is.
Happened to a charter.
Just drop it in right here.
This couple come up. and do
Oh,
some
we didn't
stuff
get the, let me just do it like this.
10 miles in the bush.
It's giving me a syntax error. It should have been a type error because it's the wrong type of data for that.
Paddled back to
I guess I was wrong on that. It's a syntax error. Interesting.
Getting a nice stringer of trout.
I have to update my notes on that one because it should have been a type error. Let's create a type error though.
Lumby's on the line.
Let me go back to my code. I know there's a few type errors in here, so when we get to those, so this is creating a syntax error.
Take everything down to a man's undies.
Sorry, it's not even creating a syntax error because we put it in a variable. It's
Yeah.
just going to return undefined
Caleb reached in a pocket.
because
Yes, Benny.
there is no length property.
Over there.
There is no length property. Let's put prop for property. It's pretty common. You'll see that all the time in coding. All right, snippet 3. What do we have going on here?
Is it actually missing the variable?
Which variable?
Well, what's supposed to be true?
That's a good point. This is always going to evaluate to true. And that's okay. You can put an if true. It's kind of pointless, but it's not an error. It's just weird because it doesn't do anything. It'll always evaluate to true. It'll just run the code. Maybe you're doing that if you wanted to create block scope. Yes, Jordan.
The word true is missing a closing parentheses.
Yeah, that's the one. No parenthesis. So let me make this multi-line so I can put the code comment there. Let me actually break it again. So that's, there we go. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So now this one here.
Object, let my object, there should be an equal to sign.
So this is called initializing an empty variable. This is actually valid.
Okay.
But what it does is it actually assigns this value to undefined. It just makes the variable exist ahead of time. And then what you can do is assign properties to it later. Yes, object doesn't have any properties. It's undefined. So let's take a look at this in the browser. And there's our type error. So this is what I was expecting up here. Because number doesn't have a length property, I would have expected to see a type error. Object doesn't have a property either. So it doesn't have any properties. I could put length here. Doesn't matter what we have. Let me just go back. If I make this length and run it, it's the same thing. It doesn't have any properties because we haven't declared any properties. But just to show you, you can do this. We'll do let a. And then we can do a equals 5. And then we can look at a. So you can declare your variables ahead of time like this and then use them later on. This is pretty common whenever you have loops. Sometimes you'll declare your variable outside the loop. That way you have access to it later in your code. And I'll just do that real quick. I'll say let a while a is not equal to 4. And now we're going to be looping over that whenever a is not equal to 4. So then we would say a equals 0. This is going to get overwritten. So what I'm going to do here is actually say if a, I'll put an exclamation point in front of it. A equals 0 like this. And then we can do a plus plus. And then outside of here, we could console.log a. And what this does is it makes it so I have my a value on global scope, but I'm using my a inside of this while loop, which is local scope. So I can manipulate the variable inside of these curly brackets. I can use it all I want. I can reassign it. I can update it. And then outside of the while loop, I still have access to it. So I'm just declaring it ahead of time just so I have it. It just lives out here. Even though right now on line 28, it's considered undefined. When I get to line 30, I'm actually defining the value of a. I'm saying if a is falsy, then assign it to 0. And then after that, we're going to increment it by 1. Yes, Ryan.
I know it's common practice to declare variables ahead of time, but is it considered best practice to declare them without any value in them ahead of time like that, or?
Sometimes. It's not a best practice thing. It's a situational thing. My example here doesn't really have that situation, so it might look a little odd. But there are times where you don't necessarily know if this is going to be an array or an object or a number or what it's going to be. And then you'll set up logic for each of those cases and you'll handle it accordingly. So in those cases, you can set it to nothing ahead of time. And then you can handle each one based on what it actually gets assigned to later, especially if the data is coming in from an API. This value could get assigned to an error. So whenever there's actually a syntax for this. You can say throw, I keep typing it wrong, throw new error. I can say this is going to be a type error. Whenever you run this will actually throw a type error in my code. Whenever that happens, I can assign A to the type error. It doesn't like the syntax. Actually, you have to return it, and then you have to assign the return value. So that's what's going to happen there. Not too worried about assigning values to error messages. But whenever that does happen, you want to be able to actually update those. Actually, you can't assign it to the error itself. It's the error message you're assigning it to. So it'd be error.message. So it was a little misleading on that. But yeah, so we could assign this to literally anything and then handle it. Personally, I avoid this as much as possible. I like to assign it to whatever data type it's going to be. So if this is going to be a string, then I initialize it to an empty string. If it's going to be a number, I'll initialize it to 0. There are times, though, where you don't want to initialize it to 0 because maybe you are doing some sort of math and 0 is a possible answer. And you basically want to check, is this undefined or is this a number? So in that case, you could say let A, and then you could do if A is NaN, something like this. If A is not a number, then you would actually assign it in that case. We could also check if type of A strictly equals undefined. We could do something like that, and then we're assigning it to a value. Lots of different ways to figure this out. But this is one of those cases where all it does is assigning it ahead of time is it gives you access to it outside of your local scope. So that's where you would do that. I believe I may be mistaken this for Python, but I think you can comma separate these as well. Yes. Some languages don't support that. So you can assign all these values at once, all on one line, and then reassign them later in your code as you need them. You can also, if you haven't seen this syntax before, it's kind of cool. I'll just do 3. If you have 3 values inside of an array, you can wrap this in curly brackets like this. And now this is assigned to 1, this is assigned to 2, and this is assigned to 3. So it'll actually destructure this array, pull the elements out, and assign each value to one of these. So pretty cool syntax. It's a little shortcut. You'll see this quite a bit when we get into React. There's a function that returns 2 things every single time. The first one is basically a variable, and the second item is how you set the variable. That function in particular, they use something called a setter. The setter is what allows you to set the value of your variable, and the variable itself is considered a getter because it gets the value of the variable. So a little bit complex thing there, but just so you know, this is a syntax that you'll get familiar with later. So here it is, destructuring of arrays. You can also destructure objects, but if you destructure objects, the object property names have to match. So I'll create an object real quick. Const my obj equals, and I'll just do 2 so we can get into our assignment. We'll call this apple. We have 1 apple and we have banana. We got 2 of those. So this is our object. It's got 2 fruits in it. And if we wanted to actually assign this to 2 separate variables, I could say const curly brackets apple comma banana equals my obj, just like that. So we just created 2 variables outside of the object, and this is assigned to 1 and this is assigned to 2. So just kind of a little shortcut thing there. Another little syntax you'll see quite a bit, especially when we get into backend code. We use this all the time in backend because we're retrieving items from a database, and we'll just destructure the item out of the database because we know exactly what the name of it is. For example, first name, last name, Whatever the data types are, we just grab them like this. And we have all of our variables assigned ahead of time. All right, so I'm going to start on the assignment. We do have some more in here. I can just run through these quickly and just kind of let you know what they are. That might be helpful. I'll do that quickly, and then we'll get into the assignment. So here we have a reference error because we have the same variable being assigned twice with the let keyword. If I were to remove the let keyword, this becomes valid. Also, this one has a capital M. So that's actually just neither of these values are being used. This is still a reference error because we have an undeclared variable inside of our console.log because this doesn't match either of those. So this is a case issue. Snippet 6. We got two sets of semicolons here. So this is a syntax error. Can only have one semicolon. Snippet 7. Sometimes we've got to really look to see what's going on here. We're using a push method, which doesn't exist on strings. We're trying to use the push method on a string. So this is a type error. This is the wrong data type for this method. This method doesn't exist on strings. This is an array method. If this were an array of characters, then we could use this method. If we wanted to add this to a string, then we would plus using concatenation, reassign the value with concatenation, that sort of thing. This one you might not have seen before. This right here is a range error. Basically what this means is we're trying to create an array with negative number of elements. This is another way to create array literals. So this is the exact same thing as saying my array, and I'm just doing a reassignment here, equals this. So this is the exact same syntax. Let me just put the let in there. We already have a ton of errors in here. I don't have to worry about it running. Exact same code. The difference is how it stores it in memory. It's not really important, but it does take up just a little bit more space in memory to do it this way. And it takes longer to type it. So there's really no benefit over it. The number you put in here is how big your array is going to be. So if you say that it's going to be -1 in length, you can't have a negative length on your array. So that doesn't work. Example 9, we have a scoping issue here, which is creating a reference error because we're trying to reference a variable inside of local scope. They're both in local scope, but this is the higher functional scope. This is inside of this if block. So we don't have access to the inner var on line 62 because this is encapsulated between these curly brackets here. So when you have curly brackets, the scope of that variable is within those curly brackets. You cannot access it outside unless you were to do something like this, let inner var. Now we can access this variable here. We'd have to remove this let actually for that to work and be valid. So that's where you would use something like that. You have a bunch of if statements. You could declare your variable ahead of time, reassign it, and then reset it here. And the last one, does anyone want to try this one?
You've got mixed quotation marks there.
Exactly. Yep, that's all it was, mixed quotation marks. So that's a syntax error, and that would throw and stop your code from running completely. So yeah, that's it for these. I'm going to bring up the assignment now. I believe I have it opened on my other browser. Yep. So hopefully I am in the correct. I am. I see add submission. Let's open this up. All right, so we have starter code for today. We have this .get link here, so you can download this. You don't necessarily have to clone it. If you want to work directly off of the browser and just copy and paste it over, you can do that. One thing to note is the README on this repository is very useful. Let me just visit it here. I'll show you this. So this is the README. Whenever you load a repository, it's always going to load the README underneath. So lots of information here about it. And this is how you can format your actual assignment. You say problem 1, your description here. This is an abstract assignment. I'm not looking for perfect answers. I'm just looking for understanding. So if you're not using the correct terminology, not a big deal, but do your best on that. And if you're not sure, just give it your best guess. This is going to be an effort graded assignment. As long as you give it a really good go and your answer makes sense, you're not just throwing some text in there, then you'll get credit for it. I'm not too worried about being perfect on this because there's going to be more than one way to solve these is the main reason. Discover what the actual problem is and put that answer in there, if that makes sense. So let me actually get into some of the code here and just kind of show. Let's see, we have a data.json, app.js, and the README we were just looking at. So I'll just start with the index.html. This is our entry point. This is how they're labeled. Problem 1. What's wrong with problem 1 here? I don't have a way to close this. I should have put a second comment like end of problem 1. That would have made this a little more clear. Problem 1 encapsulates the entire head. What's wrong with the head? So just write up a little write up with anything you see wrong with the head. Give as much information as you can about it. Problem 2, we're referring to this image element. What's wrong with the image element? Some of this might be performance based. Some of this might be actual bugs. So the idea here is to analyze this with Lighthouse, check the network tools, and as well use the dev tools as much as you can to try to solve this and see what's going on. Like try to figure out exactly what's happening with this. Here's problem 3, referring to this script. What is this script? Why would we have this here? Try to figure out what's going on with that. Do your best with that one. It's not something we really cover much anymore. We're going to open up this data.json. There is no bugs in here. I just wanted to show you what this file is. We have a curly bracket and a curly bracket. And then in between that, we have these key value pairs making up these properties. This gets converted into a JavaScript object inside of our JavaScript file. All I'm doing here is simulating an API call. So if we open up the app.js, load user data, mock data for exercise. So we're fetching data from data.json. We have a bunch of asynchronous code here. None of this is a problem, but here we have an issue. So you might have to use your resources to figure out what's going on with this. Maybe do some Googling, see what you can see, try to figure out what's happening. Just give this your best shot. This one's going to be a little bit tricky. Here's problem 10. Problem 10 is this loop here. And then problem 11 is telling us to consider problem 3. So take a look at this, see if you can figure out what's wrong with it. If this syntax doesn't look familiar, again, consider problem 3 and what you can do to solve it. I don't see any actual syntax errors with this. This is all performance based. So this is going to be heavily dependent on Lighthouse, the performance and the network tabs to solve most of these. Or just kind of looking at this and noticing things could help as well. Anyone have any questions about this? About these files?
I got a question, but it ain't about the files. We out tomorrow, correct?
Saturday, yes. I only do the classes Monday to Friday. If you were in Robert's cohort, yeah, there is no more Saturday classes. It's only Monday to Friday.
Okay.
So I'm glad you asked that. I was actually going to bring that up. Oh, I forgot to show the CSS file while I'm here. So this is where the other problems are. Again, these are all performance-based issues. None of these are actual like debugging things. It is things that you might want to adjust for better performance and best practices, if that makes sense. And then just do your best on the results in here. A couple sentences is fine. The more details, the better. That'll help your understanding more than anything. And this is basically how you can break this down. So let me get back to the actual instructions here. you'll put a reflective summary, just what you thought about the experience with this and using the tools to try to solve this. I did my best to come up with something that you would actually like. This is kind of as realistic as I could make it without actually diving too deep, and making it really tricky. As far as I tried to clearly label the problems the best I could. It's all stuff that you could solve using your dev tools. So hopefully you can find all that. Here's where you're going to put your reflective summary. Are there any questions? All the answers are going into this day 5 markdown file inside of your original repo. So you'll continue using the same repo. And yeah, that's it. It's just those 10 things. Hopefully you can get through these. If you're stuck on any of them, just reach out. Maybe throw something into class Slack. And if somebody knows what's going on, share what you found. That's actually a very common practice in developers, is talking to other developers and say, hey, take a look at my code, see what's going on here. Very, very common. It's also common to not know things and have to ask senior developers and learn new things. It's probably the most common thing, is having to learn things on the fly. So keep that in mind as well. We're not necessarily trying to teach you to memorize all the syntax and all these terms and everything like that. We're trying to teach you that things are possible and show you the tools on how to solve them. So you don't need to remember the .push method. You just need to remember that you can put things in arrays and then look up how to do it. That's the main thing. All right, so I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, unless somebody has something they want to add. We will have a lecture on Monday. I know it's Martin Luther King Day, but it's just 3 hours. If you can't make it for some reason, that's fine. You always have the video. Just let me know in Slack that you're not going to be here. That way I can keep up on the attendance a little easier. It makes it easier when I'm updated ahead of time. So let's get the breakout rooms going. We will be using the new platform next week. I want to make sure I remind everyone of that. The new platform is going to be web-based, so you will have to be on a computer for that. If you're using your cell phone, I don't know how it would work. It might let you log in. I haven't tested that functionality. So hopefully everyone is able to do this through laptops. Just trying to get these breakout rooms set up still. There we go.
It's my night for bath, so I gotta run. But I'll do my best with the assignments, and if I have any questions, I'll jump on the Slack.
Perfect. That's the way to do it.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Lewis, for another good lecture.
Yeah, have a good night. Looks like I need one more room. This will be the nice thing when we get to the new platform, is I don't have to manually set all these up ahead of time and put everyone in them. You can just pick a room. And then if you want to collaborate, you'll be able to collaborate. All right, opening up the rooms. Ending the recording.